to Aware. We are dedicated to communicating information that inspires your positive growth and change. Are you interested in a peaceful planet? Are you interested in optimal health? Are you living with purpose? Are you enjoying your life? We realize each person can make a difference, and our mission is to empower your awareness. The choices that you make in every moment shape your life, and we encourage you to realize that you have your own answers and to always listen to your own truth. We invite you to stay aware.
So welcome to the Aware Show. I am Lisa Garr, and we are seemingly living in a world where, and I say seemingly with the air quotes here, where we are feeling like we're forced to choose sides on a number of issues. Do we stay at home and shelter in place, or do we find a way to keep our economy flowing? Do we choose leadership for all or leadership from one? Do we feel like we're making a difference in the social justice movement, or are we feeling like it's going to go away? There are so many choices that we get to make on a daily basis, but I feel personally that we're being positioned as a humanity to choose sides. And this is why I'm so grateful for my guest today, someone who is not a stranger to polarization and having to choose sides, someone who grew up with gunshot holes outside of his bedroom window and now is sharing stages with people like Marianne Williamson and Deepak Chopra. And Justin Michael Williams knows how to change environments by embracing them, mostly. And I'm so grateful to know Justin and to have him on the show today and to bless this conversation to be a healing conversation, Justin, to be one where people can overcome this polarization. So that is my first question to you, my friend, is how are you managing during these times of extreme polarization? I read a great post that you did about this, so I wanted to start here.
Well, first and foremost, Lisa, I just want to say thank you for having me here for this conversation. It's really such a huge gift that we get to be here having this kind of empowering conversation in this time. And one of the things that I think is the most important, and the beautiful thing is we're waking up to it now, is dealing with the polarization has been a fascinating experience because so many of us for a long time wanted to pretend like it didn't exist, right? And just shut our eyes to it. And like, those people over there who were like worried about all that stuff and protesting and marching, those people, we don't want to deal with that. Like, we just want to think about love and light. We just want to think positive. We just have to keep our minds in the right space. And so now what's happening is we're recognizing, it was one of the things that one of my teachers, Sienna Sherman, said to me. She said, Justin, oftentimes the bigger the light, the bigger the shadow it casts. And yes. America, the United States, and so many of us in the transformational world, we pride ourselves in this way of light, right? In this way of being, whether it's true or the narrative or whatever it is. But it's not until we fully embrace the shadow of what's really going on that we can find truth, that we can find reconciliation, that we can heal, and that we can come together to create a future that's not just better for people like us, but better for everyone. Yes. And that's what I'm really most interested in right now.
I remember having conversations with Marianne Williamson on my radio show, probably 6 years ago or 5 years ago, talking about how I never felt empowered to vote and who am I to make a difference and my senator will never call me back or listen, to the massive transformation and catalyzation that's occurred over the last 4 years. Has been such a reckoning that we have stepped up to with our confidence. Now we know the difference between electoral versus collegiate votes.
We all know the difference.
We all know the difference. We didn't, and especially in the spiritual community, it was that spiritual bypass of oh, that's for them. We'll just do this over here with the light workers, and then we'll let the politicians just be numb. We'll just be numb to that because they, we can't make a difference anyway. And that kind of might have been the case at the time. And now, not only had they all been fired, but we're at a place where people have to listen in order to maintain their position politically.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Well, and you know what's really interesting about this, Lisa, that I love is I recently wrote, and I think this might have been one of the posts that you saw, was that what's actually happening from my perspective, and I remember watching the election in November and watching these bars, the red bar and the blue bar, just like creeping toward one another and creeping and creeping and creeping and getting closer and closer. And me just thinking, I just want them to just keep going and just blend into each other. Because or just shoot out the top and create this purple, because what's actually happening is there's this perception that we're divided, right? That we're divided. And the thing is I spent the whole night watching and reading Fox News and these other places that I'm typically not reading. And I realized very quickly that there's not a divide. We actually really all want the same thing. Most of us really do want the same thing. And there's this position that we've had to take where both sides, we can just say that, both sides are being forced to choose something that they don't even really want. Both sides don't really even want it.
Right.
And then blaming one another. And so we're pointing right and left and right and left, and pointing right and left actually prohibits and blocks us from pointing in the direction of the actual problem itself, which is not with one another. Most people are good. Most people want and think that we're doing good. And so my question has become, over and over that I'm asking, is how do we create a world and a scenario where we can invite people to fall in love with each other again? Where we can invite people to fall in love with one another, because that's what's missing right now.
To be able to at least have a dialogue. Sometimes you don't have to agree, but there has to at least be a dialogue. I have a question, because you had posed this in a post that you did, and you felt a new party emerging, but what do we call it? And you asked that several times in that post. And then you asked for a poll, and you put a poll out. What kind of answers did you get from that? Do you remember?
Yes, I'm so glad you asked me this. So I got so many, because I felt that. I was like, there's a new party emerging. Something new is coming up. And I'll tell you, there was a lot of answers that came up. Some people said purple, because red and blue and this and that. But the name that has stuck with me, that I feel this calling in my spirit right now to even jump into how would we make this a thing? The United Party.
Ooh, I love that. Yeah.
That's it's not about it being an ultra left or an ultra right or an ultra any of this stuff. It's not another version of those things. It's what is a party that actually creates something where we are together, that's coming together for all of us.
I got a vision when you said that. It popped right into my head, was that is something people would want to be a part of. Who wouldn't want to be a part of a united party? And there are so many people that I spoke with, and you probably did as well, that says, I want to vote for this person, but they were saying, I don't want to vote for this person, but I'm going to anyway, because I don't have another choice.
Yeah.
There were a lot of people in between there. And it didn't reflect it in the numbers. I mean, the numbers truly showed, 74 million, 79 million, whatever it wound up being. But I think there were a lot of people that felt like they didn't have a choice.
No one, I'm not going to say no one, most all people that you talk to are unhappy with the state of how we're being cared for, and we're trying to figure out who to blame, and we're ending up blaming one another. These people are blaming. It's it's this whole thing, but that is not where the problem isn't just here with us, right? There's a bigger picture. And that's when I had that thought of wow, what if there was it seems like Democrat and Republican, okay, we did that, outdated, Lincoln did a new party. I think this isn't working anymore for us, And so what would it feel like to have a new party that was emerging? So anyway, we'll see what happens.
Well, here's the thing, is that in the past, other new parties have tried to emerge, the Independents, the Green, And it has it has taken away from the votes of the Democratic or the Republican Party, so that it has been tried, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a political party. It can be a united party of all sorts. It doesn't have to be on the ballot. This is the first time I've ever heard the president-elect of the United States mention social justice as an item on the agenda. The first time I have ever heard that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You hear climate change, you hear economy, you've never heard that.
Yeah.
That was huge. That's on the agenda.
Yeah. And it has to be, because as hard as it is for us to face it, but we're facing it now because our country we're evolving and we're becoming ready for it. We're one of the most socially unjust civilizations ever. They had the research in a recent book called Caste, that was a New York Times bestseller, that said that Nazi Germany looked and sent researchers to the United States. Hitler sent researchers to the United States so they could find out how the United States successfully dehumanized African Americans to the point where the whole country was doing it, so that they could figure out how to go do that to Jews. This is not the history. That's a fact. It's recorded in everywhere. And so these are hidden from us because we don't like I started with, we don't like to think of ourselves as the US like that. We're light, we're the best, we're this, we're that. But now we're going, okay, the bigger the light, the bigger the shadow. This ain't working. We got some stuff to face, Yes. And now's the time. Now's the time.
Isn't that everything with our pandemic world? It has been the great equalizer, this pandemic has. And in many ways, it's good. And in many ways, it's incredibly challenging economically. And I do know that we're still nowhere near out of this. Just, as does 9/11 change the way we travel, COVID is going to change the way that we live for decades to come. Decades. And your generation, my daughter's generation, younger than you, are going to have to live in this post-pandemic world. And it's a matter of accepting that in order to move on and not denying it, which is part of the other part of polarization and so forth that I've been speaking about, is how do we come together on a majorly polarized topic it really is a difference between to stay inside, shelter in place, or to circulate the economy.
Yeah.
That is a tough one. It is a tough one.
It's tough for people, but you know what? It wouldn't have to be tough if we were being cared for by the leaders in the way that we need to be. Other countries are doing this. It's really fascinating because we look at America, and I say this as somebody who loves America, I'm not, I'm not that person. But the thing is we can look at all these other countries and see what they're doing successfully and well, and we're just not doing any of it, and so we're just not doing any of it. And so it was really a fascinating experience. I went in October of last year. I went to Mexico just during the pandemic, and I went to Mexico, and I was getting ready to leave to Mexico for a month, and I was telling my mom, I'm going to Mexico, and my mom's like, oh my God, be careful, COVID, this and that. I said, Mom, do you see how programmed we are to think that we are the worst place to be in the world? They are sending Doctors Without Borders that normally sends people to Vietnam and Africa. They're sending doctors to the United States. I'm not going anywhere worse. I was in Los Angeles. That's probably the worst place to be.
I hear you. That's where I am. And it's very difficult. You cannot move here right now. There's nowhere to go. And it is one of the most locked down places in the country. And so with all of this, I just wanted to ask you a little bit about your background. I know that my audience might have not met you from the Aware Show before, because this is the first time that I've had you on.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you a little bit about your story and where you come from and how you've dealt with adversity and polarization in your life.
Yeah. So go ahead.
I was going to say really, and inclusion. Really, your life has been about inclusion, but we'll get to that.
So I interestingly. So I grew up in a home with gunshot holes literally on the outside of my house, and domestic violence and trauma and just a lot. And I always tell people it's not like the oppression Olympics. We all have our conditioning, no matter how much money you had growing up or whatever. We all have our stuff that we deal with. And my mom is actually Persian and Middle Eastern. So follow me tracking this here. My mom's Persian and Middle Eastern. My dad is Black. My dad's African American. My mom was adopted. So this Persian Middle Eastern baby was adopted into an Italian and Spanish family, Italian Catholic family. Okay. So my grandparents that adopted my mom, they adopted her when she was just a couple days old. Italian Catholic, came here from Sicily on a boat,
Oh,
9 brothers and sisters, like that kind of a
first
family.
generation. Oh, wow.
First generation. And so what happened, however, was when my mom got engaged to my dad, my Italian Catholic family disowned my mom.
Wow.
Disowned completely. They said, if you're going to marry an N-word, you can never come back here again. And, so they kicked her out of the house. My mom had to go live with my dad's family. My mom had her wedding. My dad's grandpa walked my mom down the aisle. No one from the family came. They had a big Italian meeting on Sunday dinners. And this was a very close family, like came on the boat. They all lived on the same block. There's a story that, and this is so old, we can't even imagine this happening, but there's a story that like my great grandmother, the Italian what came from Sicily, she used to breastfeed like everyone's kids, on the block. Like that's how close they all were. Like, just like that kind of a thing. And so this was a big breakup. And so my mom, I'm telling this story because, a lot of people say, Justin, like you are sometimes like the most optimistic Black person ever. Like, how do you, coming together? And I say this, my mom and my dad were like dealing with such severe racism from my mom's family. And then on the one other hand, then my dad's family had this incredible embrace of love. And then what happened was my grandfather, my mom's dad, went back to one of these big Italian dinners and said, we want to bring Barbara back. Barbara's my mom. We want to bring her back. And we think that this is crazy. We're not going to do this. We don't know. We don't like it, but we want to bring her back. And the rest of the family had a meeting and they said, if you speak to her, we're never speaking to you again. And so the family split in half.
Oh,
And so 4 aunts and uncles came back and welcomed my mom in, and the other 4 never spoke to each other again, down to the point that all 9 of them, my great aunts and uncles, they've all passed away except for my grandmother, and they didn't go to each other's funerals.
oh
Like,
my God.
grudge. So I'm sharing this level of detail with you
That's
to say
a
that
lot of family drama.
it's
Wow.
so much. And I'm sharing this level of detail with you, not just to make it like the Jerry Springer show of my family, but because of this. My grandpa and my grandma and my 2 uncles and one of my aunts came back to welcome my mom in. And the healing that occurred would blow your mind.
Oh,
My grandpa ended up raising me with great love. I have pictures of my grandma and my dad dancing. They had a second wedding for a reception for my mom and the whole family. And my grandpa was one of the most loving people in my entire life. They did the deep work that it took to come together, and all the way to the point to where, all the way down to where my grandpa was passing away, he was going over my Black grandmother's house and mowing her lawn and doing her yard work, and they were great friends. And I imagine them both in heaven now, just, or wherever we are in the universe, dancing together. And I share this because we often think that people can't change. And that level of resignation is the opposite of possibility. And we as transformational people who believe in growth and change, we know because we've experienced in our own life that change is possible. If it wasn't, we wouldn't be into growth and transformation.
right.
And so this idea that people can't change, I know that it's not true because I've experienced it in my own family. And my grandpa looks more like Santa Claus than he does somebody related to me. And so as I've been blessed to be able to be in a mixed environment, in an inclusive environment, where literally my parents were divorced, I was the only Black man in my home, And so like I'm used to being in these different kind of mixed spaces. And so I've had this blessing of being able to really see in spaces that some people call divides, and to see that people can change and people can grow, but we have to meet in a different place. We have to
On
meet in
to-
the
you are the perfect person to speak about this. On top of all of that, your parents split and you still found a window of joy.
Oh
On,
yeah.
on top of all of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so let me just dive into that for a sec. So you found joy in every place there was division.
You have to find it sometimes.
Wow.
And it's not to deny that there was pain and hardship and all of those different kinds of things, but we get to choose, I believe, when we all know this as people who are in growth and transformation, is we get to choose that saying that I love that Oprah always says, like, is this happening to me or is this happening for me? And looking back in my life, I can see that so much happened for me. Like I wouldn't be here having the conversations I'm having today if it wasn't for all of these different things. So,
which are phenomenal conversations. I mean, you've been all over the media and the news, and you're creating programs of really doing the work of inclusion. And we'll get to that in a second. But I love that you dove into it and you found the spaces of joy amidst all of it. Not to say that there wasn't any pain, but that's kind of part of it. Would you say, that cliche phrase, the bigger the breakdown, the bigger the breakthrough? Would you say that we're in such a freaking cataclysmic breakdown right now that there is a great breakthrough that's going to come from it?
I sure freaking hope so. And
I do
say that. Well, eventually, I hope we see it in our lifetime, and I have hope for that. But there's a lot of research happening right now on something that I've been geeking out on called post-traumatic growth. And we hear about post-traumatic stress all the time, right? Like post-traumatic PTSD, but they're post-traumatic growth. And it's the study of why is it that a trauma can happen to one person and they get completely broken down for the rest of their life and fall apart. But a similar trauma, or even something that you consider a less heavy trauma, or a heavier trauma, could happen to another person, and they end up finding purpose and meaning and transforming their life and breaking through. What is that? Why is that the case? So it's that phenomenon is called post-traumatic growth, when you have a trauma and you find a growth edge from that afterwards. And everybody doesn't go that direction, but one of the things that they prove that takes us in the direction of post-traumatic growth is a deep reckoning and compassion and understanding of the truth of what actually happened, and acceptance. Acceptance not meaning condoning, acceptance not meaning it was okay or you think that what happened was right. It just is a truth of, this is the truth of what occurred. And now, facing that truth, what am I going to do about it? And what happens is we're oftentimes, Lisa, I find we have these traumas or these pains or these things that happen. So let's just take anything that can happen in our lives: domestic violence, a trauma that we had when we were a kid, social injustice, slavery, and we spend our time running away from it. Run away, run away, run away. How do I get away from this thing? And even that thought of, I just have to think positive, is running away sometimes. And so with post-traumatic growth, it's not about running away. It's about creating a safe enough distance from it so that you can observe it and look at it and go, what is it that I need to learn from this? How can I grow from this? How can I create meaning from this? And so what happens is when we're too attached to it, we entangle with it. And if we're too attached, we can't observe it because we are it. But if we get too far away from it, we can't see it either. And so right now we're learn to see it.
In this, I'm so excited you brought this up, because in the Black Lives Matter movement that I've seen you speak on so beautifully, eloquently. And I did an incredible 5-part series with Lisa Nichols, and I just have immersed myself in the movement. And I heard you in the beginning, and we've had many, conversations in the communities we're in about, in the beginning you would hear, well, all lives matter, or I never saw color, and all of those phrases that would just light you up, understandably, educating white people. These are offensive for these reasons. And you've done a lot of education over the last several months.
Yeah.
I think what happened with the protests and the level of the global protests absolutely needed to happen to catalyze this awakening. It wasn't enough in the 60s. It wasn't enough in the 90s. This has to be enough. This has to be enough. And I see more change happening now than I had seen in the 90s and in the 60s.
Yeah.
So, and I'm so grateful for that. But my question here is, where are we going? Do you see the same level of change that I see? Do you think it's going to stick? What are your conversations now?
This is a really good question, Lisa. So I'm going to give you this. I've been saying over and over and over that the revolution, the real revolution, has to start inside. And when I say that, what I'm saying is, if our internal work does not match the force and commitment of our external work, we're missing a huge opportunity. And we can, and listen, I say this publicly all the time, and sometimes when people who are activists hear me start to say this, they get really stressed, and I want you to listen carefully and follow me through this, because I'll say this, we can do all the hashtags. We can Black Lives Matter, we can defund the police, we can no more white supremacy, we can burn down the whole system, we can elect a new president, which we've done. But if we haven't done the internal work that it takes to show up for the world differently, then nothing will ever change long term. We'll just keep recreating the same thing over and over and over in cycles, because we couldn't possibly do anything different if we haven't shown up differently. And so what I'm saying is that the internal work matters. And I consider myself like an internal activist. I do go to the marches and I do go to the protests, but that's not where I'm focusing my energy. And when people hear me say that, that's when sometimes people go, what do you mean? Like, we have to protest, we have to march. So I want to be very clear. I'm not saying that the external work doesn't matter.
Or is over by all means, right?
I'm saying the external work matters so much that we have to do our internal work so that the external work can have the impact we actually want it to have. And so that's it. We want it to have long-term impact. And if I can just say really quick, Lisa, like, this sounds very theoretical, right? Ooh, theory, like, sounds nice. And so I tell people, okay, you think this sounds theoretical, let's make it practical for you. How many of y'all, I'm just going to keep it real here, how many of y'all have been in a relationship with somebody, whether it's romantic or not, got out of that relationship because you realized it wasn't right for you anymore, got in a new relationship down the line with a different person, and soon enough realize you're in the same relationship with a different person?
Right.
Same habit, same issues, same conversation, same stuff. Why? Because
you haven't broken the pattern.
Changed within. You can't show up for any relationship differently, with your body, with your family, with romance, with money, and with social justice and change. And so this is the work that I'm here to do, is to help us wake up inside.
That's where it's got to start, with that awareness, with that what you call woke awareness of that. Just you can't unsee it. You can never go backwards from it. It is permanently burned into your consciousness. So you can only go forward, because backwards is not an option.
Backwards is not an option. Yeah, you can't unsee it.
You can't. And I feel we have more of a possibility of getting there now than ever.
Me too.
We're not there.
No.
But I feel more than this is just my feeling, being immersed in it and in the news and a broadcaster. I finally feel that we can't unsee this.
No, you're
Do you
right.
feel that?
Yes, and that
Oh,
yes. And
right.
and it's a really interesting. So I agree. I think that we have
Great.
more chance than ever. And a question that I pose to everybody that says this is what does getting there mean?
Mm,
Like what does that mean? Like we're gonna get where? Where are we getting to? You know? And when do we know we made it? And I'm not coming to you with an answer. I'm just saying it's a great position to put in our mind because what that does when we say getting there is it, to me, sometimes puts this thing way somewhere out in the future that we might get to versus no, now, right now, I am going to start living in the moment as if right now I'm being the person that I'm imagining that I'm being in that world over there that's somewhere in the future. How
mm-hmm.
can I be that now? And that's how we're gonna get there, you know?
It's, I mean, visioning is a huge part of this, and we're going to talk a little bit about how you do that. But, you know, at the beginning of the Black Lives Matter movement, slavery was still legal. I mean, we that was finally called out, and that was, you know, we got to go backwards a bit and undo some things, and we really need to fix a lot of laws. A lot of laws are needing to get repaired and fixed, and I really hope that our current, you know, the new administration can start to put some of that into movement. And but it takes to be, I didn't know that. I personally did not know that slavery in some parts was still legal in the year 2020. I did not know that. And I was so, that was a perfect example of how I was in such a state of unawareness and wanted to know more. So bringing about that and the healing that needs to occur and the education that needs to occur and all of that I've been learning and immersing myself in has been amazing. You recommend an incredible resource and reading list on your website too, which I appreciate. And you've interviewed some phenomenal people.
Yeah.
Layla, I'm just,
Layla Saad.
oh,
Yeah. Layla Saad, Sean King. These interviews were just a dream.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, talk about transformational interviews. Those interviews you need to watch over and over and over again because you just hear it differently. It really starts to unravel you. Props to you. Thank you for that.
Thank
Beautiful
you.
people you've introduced us to, and I'm so grateful for that. Where was I going? Because it was really good. No, it was really, I was getting there. As we're learning and as we're waking up and as these types of things, we're starting that process now. We're in the crawl phase. We haven't even gotten to walk and run. Where do you see us visually in your mind's eye in 2 years?
Mhm. In 2 years, that's really
Yeah.
interesting. Okay.
I don't want to go too far out. I want to go
Yeah.
attainable. 2 years can happen like that.
Yeah, 2 years can happen really fast. I would love, on the external, I would love to see us in a place where police who kill unarmed African American people or any people like can be held accountable for murder easily, so that we don't see this harm that we're seeing right now in the world. I would love to see a world in which there are laws that are reflecting the truth of what's happening in the United States and really support everyone. And really, I think in 2 years, and this could happen in months. So hopefully by 2 years, this could happen. So I'm being generous here with the timeline. Just a public, national, from the President of the United States and all the different kind of leaders, an acknowledgement of what has really happened in the United States. Can somebody come on and have a special that's not political party oriented, that's bipartisan, however we want to call it, where people are coming together and saying, this is the truth. This is what happened. This is what the United States is built upon. Everyone listen. This is what happened to the Native American people. This is what happened to African American people. And not even going into all the conspiracies in this, but like, these are the facts. Here's the true history of the United States. Now, given that, what are we going to do about it? What are we going to do to make sure we don't keep repeating this? And I think that kind of a conversation will change the trajectory of our country and the trajectory of the world.
The acknowledgement is huge. And I'd like to dive into that for a sec, because that's a beautiful proposition, is to have the acknowledgement, the fact that this country was built on the backs of slaves and built on the backs of power struggles and harm and injury, and that needs to be healed. I was listening to an amazing interview with T.D. Jakes, and he was so passionately comparing the slavery movement to that of being molested. And people who are in that position of being molested are never heard. They talk about it and they try to say something and they try to get help, and they're told to shut up.
Yeah.
And that it didn't happen, to deny, all of those things. And he was doing this incredible comparison. And I really felt that from him, that it's synonymous. And when someone who has ever been molested finally gets that acknowledgement or justice in some way from that experience, it's the beginning of the healing. It's just the very beginning of the healing.
Yeah.
And that could happen. That could happen.
And
that's
should.
beautiful.
Like, we're the true stories, and this is why when you're asking, where are we going to end up? It is until that happens, we're not going to go very far.
Good point.
We can't, because what is the process of transformation? The first step has to be acknowledgement of something. Like, that's the first step, and so
acknowledgement from those that matter.
Yeah.
That's the other piece of it.
Yeah.
Is that those that, not that, that lived 400 years ago, but those that are repeating the problems and that have a powerful voice to make a difference, and then the grassroots movements begin.
Yeah.
I mean, and on that end, with having that level of acknowledgement, then comes the rebuilding. Like, what do we want this to look like?
Yeah.
And how is that going to heal? And how can we be inclusive to not only, Black Lives Matter, but gay, straight, young, old, all of this, so that we can have this conversation of inclusivity wherever we go. But the acknowledgement really is truly just at its infancy stage. I don't even think it has begun yet, has it?
No. Well, and you know what, Lisa, like I wrote an article that people can find that got some legs on it, called Ending Racism: How to Change the World in One Generation. And one of the things that I think I want to just implant in people's minds is a consideration. I remember in the beginning of the massive uprising of Black Lives Matter movement in 2020, and I'm doing beginning in air quotes because obviously it's been happening for a long time, is I was reading all these articles and reading all these things, and I kept finding this constant thread where everybody was saying, well, one day, in a future generation, like, racism, but like, this is going to be a fight for lifetimes, and it's something that will never end, and we just have to deal with it, and it will never end. And I had this moment where I was sitting down. I was actually in a jacuzzi, where I feel like my best ideas come.
Okay.
Water,
being around water.
In the water. I was like reading in the jacuzzi, and I said, why not? Like, why can't it end? Why not? Like, why does racism have to be this lifelong fight that's going to take many, many generations? Like, contextually, the word racism, it was not even in language 500 years ago. Like, yes, there's been different in-group, out-group distinctions throughout history. This is what humans do as primates. But like, using skin color and race to define who's in the in-group, out-group, this is a classically created by America thing. Like there's this beautiful quote that I heard from Isabel Wilkerson in her book, Caste, and she says she was talking to a young African woman from Africa. And the African woman said, you know, Isabel, there's no black people in Africa.
Right.
And Isabel goes, what? What do you mean there's no black people in Africa?
I
She
totally
said,
get it.
you're only black when you go to the United States. There's in Africa, there's Yoruba and there's Nigerian and there's Ghanaian. You're only black or white once you hit the US or now the UK. And now with globalization, it's, you know, it's shifting. But even in Europe, like history of Europe, it wasn't like nobody was white. You were Scandinavian and Polish and Jewish and German and this. And so I'm saying that all of this context to say racism and using something as arbitrary as skin color is something that is a modern day creation of mankind. It is not ancient. It's not the way things just are. So why can't we undo this? Why can't we fix it? Why can't it end? And why can't it end soon?
Education, because the story keeps repeating itself and repeating itself and repeating itself through these books that have not been told the right way and have been, all they do is highlight the wrong story.
Yeah, that's it. And so
it
comes back to the same point. What do we need first? Truth.
Truth, and truth in our schools.
Yes.
And I mean, we're going to have to rewrite a bunch of books and throw a bunch away and burn them. But I think there's got to be a whole new curriculum taught in our educational system. I mean, look, we can look it up now more than ever, which is great. Children can if they're empowered to. But if they have to go take the test on Harriet Tubman and it's got to read the Harriet Tubman book and they got to recite what the book says, how's that going to break the cycle? It's got to be, go do your research, come up with an opinion of what you have, and let's discuss it. And nobody should be testing on, you know.
Pilgrims and Indians. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just like, it's so silly that we're still doing this.
We're still doing this. We're still doing this. I mean, look at how deeply it is ingrained into our cultures. Our cute little preschoolers and kindergartners come with their Indians and their things, and we all think they're so cute, and we're repeating freaking racism. I do think they are cute, but they can wear, you know, pigs and turkeys. Do they?
It's a whole different thing. And, you know, it goes back to this quote that I love so much. I say it in all of my talks, is what doesn't heal repeats. That's it.
Yes.
It's that simple.
Well, I have to ask you about, so I've looked up your programs and I follow you on your list, and I suggest everyone signing up, and you have like 1,000,000 trillion programs. Can you tell me?
Only 5.
Only 5. It seems like you are so passionately on fire that you are just starting and igniting. I just found that you have a church.
I do.
And you've been doing that for how long?
Yeah, so it's not church, but it's like I say it's if you imagine if church, Super Soul Sunday, and a TED Talk had a baby, boom, smashed together. That's what it's kind of like.
I like it. Okay.
And so it's because it's really bringing people together across many divides. And, you know, I'm not the first person to do a concept like this. Like Reverend Beckwith obviously has agape in this, but it's a very different flavor from that. And I bring in people and interview them, and we have time and we have live music. And that's a really fun way to get engaged with my community. It's totally free, differently than church. There's no donation bucket passed.
Okay. And it's called the Kingdom, right?
The Kingdom. Yeah, it's called the Kingdom. And my only note that I'm saying about that is not even really to promote it, but it's the reason why I started it is there are so many of us who just want a space where we can come together across our divides, within the divides, knowing that we don't just tolerate or honor each other's differences, but that we're stronger because of those differences. And so the Kingdom is that place where my community and our community, really everybody's welcome, come together online every Sunday at 11 a.m.
Which is really cool in Pacific. And now it's all on Zoom now, right?
It's all online. Yeah, it's not even on Zoom. It's on just, you can go on my website and you go on there, and it's not on Zoom because a lot of people, they're like, I don't want to be seen. Like I come in my pajamas, and I'm like, great. So you can come, you don't have to turn your camera on. You just come and enjoy and hear music and a good word and feel inspired for the week to come.
That's cool. So you can just view it, you can just watch it, and not necessarily, but you can still connect with people.
Oh yeah, there's
Yeah.
a whole community there chatting in the chat box,
Right.
5 different continents there. It's really, and it's become the most
How,
beautiful thing.
how long have you been doing that?
We started it in August of 2020.
Oh,
That's when that began, and it's been every Sunday since then. The first one was in August, and it's been just the most beautiful. It's been to be honest, it's one of my favorite things that's ever been created. Because to be honest, Lisa, when I had the idea, or I can't even say I had the idea, when the idea was literally implanted into my brain, I was in that space we talked about visioning, of what can I do to bring people together in a space of hope and possibility? Bring people together in a space across and bridging these divides in a real tangible way. And then that idea came to me, and I was like, starting a church? Really? Like, I was like, I didn't imagine that I would ever do something like that. And, but when you get the call, you follow it. And
well,
so,
you were asking the question.
yeah.
And that's a very important process right there, is asking the right questions and then listening. And then I love that you can listen to the replay, and now I'm probably hundreds of thousands of people that are starting to join this and experience this and have an amazing time. And it's been, 3 months?
Yeah, we have thousands of people registered, and I have it on a podcast now for people who want to listen later, and it's on YouTube. And so anyway, if you go to my website, justinmichaelwilliams.com, you can see all about that. You'll find it very easily, the kingdom.
Great. And now that process that I just mentioned about you asking the right questions and being in the right state to listen, you have, I'm sure, in one of the programs that you teach, a way that teaches us how to do that. Do you?
Mm-hmm.
Tell me, because I know I've seen it. I just want to know what it is.
Yeah. So the biggest thing, Lisa, that I have to say right now that's very clear is we have so much practice in our lives asking questions. Show me the way. We pray, we do astrology, we do tarot cards, we do readings, we read in the books, like show me, show me, show me, show me. But very few of us have any practice at listening to the messages that come back to us. And so listening comes in many ways. One of the ways that I love most is the practice of meditation. And there's my book you can check out, which I have a book that's on helping people understand how to meditate. And it's specifically a book for people who think they would never buy a book on meditation. That's who it's for.
Okay.
And it's called Stay Woke, is the title of my book, Stay Woke, a meditation guide for the rest of us. It's everywhere you can buy a book, you find it. And online, I have literally hundreds of free practices and meditations and programs that can help you tap into your own listening so that you can hear that voice inside of you that knows the way forward to ask the right questions.
See that? So that's what it is it's you get into that place of beautiful stillness and into a place of quieting your mind in order to be able to ask and answer. It's not that complicated, is it?
No, and it's really this. You can ask the right questions, but who are you asking? That's the thing. Who are you asking? And so is the voice that's the loudest in you that you're asking the questions to the fearful part of you? Is it that childhood wounding? Is it the trauma? Who is answering your good questions? And so how do we learn to get access to the voice within us that believes in our possibility? We all close our eyes and we can see these lives we haven't started living yet. We can see the world we haven't lived in yet. So how do we access the right place so we can get the answers that we need for the questions that we have in our lives? And that's what I explore in a lot of my work.
Who answers you, Justin?
That's a really beautiful question that no one has ever asked me. Can you believe that? There is this is the way that I'll describe it, okay? So there's sometimes that version of me that is like the go-getter and the achiever, and this is all that you should do, right? And that guy's kind of like right here. Yeah. And then there's that little kid version of me that's like scared and afraid and got bullied and got teased and like thinks he's not good enough and is afraid. And sometimes I remember I used to think, oh, I need to be listening to this voice more, this achiever voice, this voice that's pushing me forward, and not this one. And then what I recognized over time was that neither of those voices were mine. That the voice that was mine was the voice that was listening to both of them argue about what to do. That's the voice in between, the voice that's observing that there's even this happening. And so that space inside of you, whether you call it your highest self, whether you call it God or spirit or the universe or Allah or whatever, unicorns, whatever you want to call it, you know, because it's all connected. It's that space within you that is unshakable, immovable, and can know that there is something more possible for your life and for our world than we can imagine. And that voice, when you learn to hear that voice, things happen in your life that people think are a miracle and that are impossible.
That right there is just a pull-out meditation. I would suggest you all go back and just listen to what Justin said and do that in your mind. That is so beautiful. I got it completely. I completely got it. You got the voices going and the voices going, and they somehow converge with the voice of God inside of you, whoever the God of your heart is, and the stillness is where the answer is received. That is so, I got it completely. I got it completely.
Thank you.
That's kind of, you just explained my same process. I go into that how mode and that why me mode, and then somehow between the two of those comes this surrender to guidance, God, those that I love that have crossed over that I know are still watching over me, and that convergence of all of that is what gives me the answers. It's not shut up voices inside the head or don't get involved with the ego. It's all of it. That is so beautiful.
It's all of it. And that like is a beautiful, it really interestingly circles back to where we started, you know, which is it's not about this one side or the other, this divide within you, outside of you. It's about reckoning and honoring and owning and exploring. And, you know, one of the things that people often say, and I challenge this, is people say, you know, oneness, like what we need to know is like, we're just all one, like we're one human race, oneness, oneness, oneness. I don't think oneness is actually what we need. I think a virtue that's much, much greater than oneness is intimacy. Intimacy. To know that you can be different and to be close enough to understand. And that we can do that inside of ourselves, to be intimate with those different parts of ourselves, with one another, so that we can talk to one another. It's intimacy is what we need, not putting all of our cultures and traditions into a Vitamix and blending it up and creating a we are all one smoothie. That's not what we need. You know?
I know. We are the world. But I mean, what I see and what I saw, and images come up in my mind when you're talking, but it is more of a soul to soul type of contact than anything. Because I see, when I look at you, I see your soul, I see your little boy, I see your grown man, I see all the texture of who your soul is, of everything it's walked from and walked through and will lead forward. I see it all in you. And that is how I choose to see you, intimately connected, and just in that space, Justin, I hold you at the highest possible self you could ever be, constantly. I constantly will look at you that way. And I see everyone that way. I just will constantly look at you as the highest possible soul that you can ever be. And that is my gift to the world constantly, is to see people that way. And I love that. That makes me whole and complete.
Now that was a meditation. I felt that. I felt that. You just gave us some of your zhuzh. That was the magic right there.
You brought me tears in my eyes. Well, I thank you so much for this. This is an amazing first interview. I could talk to you forever. I love who you're being, and I love how vulnerable and open and teaching that you are all at the same time. It's been...
I love it too, Lisa. Thank you.
Oh, you're wonderful. So please check out justinmichaelwilliams.com. And you can see all that he's involved in and all of the programs that just start off with Sundays. What do you call it? The Kingdom.
Kingdom, yeah.
Start off with the
Kingdom on Sundays. And there's lots of other things there. There's the book. There's some online programs if you want to work with us more deeply, me and the community. We come together with some amazing things throughout the year. And, I think most importantly is just to remember, no matter how much you learn, how much you study, how much you watch, how many podcasts you listen to, how much you read, there's always going to be that child inside of each of us who just wants to know they're enough. Enough. Not for what they do, but for who you are. And you are enough. And when we each step into that, we can liberate ourselves and liberate one another. So
we're going to go out playing that music. You have a Billboard hit called You Are Enough. That was a perfect lead on. You were just
I didn't even know you could do that.
How'd you know? So we're going to go off listening to Justin Michael Williams' amazing song called You Are Enough. And I am Lisa Garr. And until next time, I invite you to stay aware.
Little boy, don't cry. You've been in pain enough. Little girl, don't fight. You're finally safe enough. One day I'll look into your eyes, show you you don't need to hide behind disguise. Spread your wings, you're terrified. Don't be afraid, you're born to fly. I'm by your side.